Death Race 2000 wasn't just filmed, it was unleashed. A $300,000 exploitation gamble, rushed to beat Hollywood giants. Stars at war with their director, cars too dangerous for stuntmen. Public roads turned into kill zones. It wasn't safe, it wasn't polished, but it became a cult legend, inspiring video games, remakes, and decades of controversy. Here are 20 insane facts about Death Race 2000. The grindhouse road race that should have crashed, but somehow made history. Fact 1. Corman raced against Rollerball. In 1974, Roger Corman learned MGM was producing Rollerball, a high-budget dystopian thriller about violent sports and authoritarian control. Rather than compete, he decided to beat it to theaters. He quickly greenlit Death Race 2000, slashing costs to under $530,000 and pushing for completion before MGM's release. Production raced through development, cutting corners everywhere. The gamble worked. Death Race 2000 hit theaters 2 months earlier, riding on shock value and satirical energy while Rollerball was still being hyped. Though Rollerball had big names and a glossy finish, it was Corman's smaller, bloodier, and satirical film that captured exploitation audiences. The speed and audacity of Corman's release schedule showed how a scrappy B-movie could outmaneuver Hollywood's giants. It was a guerrilla move that turned a shoestring satire into a lasting cult classic. Fact 2. The script was rewritten into satire. The film began as an adaptation of Ib Melchior's short story, The Racer, which was bleak, serious, and, in Corman's words, too vile. The script lacked the humor and exaggeration needed to hook exploitation audiences. Paul Bartel was brought in as director and writer, but even his draft wasn't satirical enough. Enter Charles B. Griffith, who had worked with Corman before, rewriting the film to emphasize absurd humor, grotesque points-for-kills gags, and over-the-top blood. Air-powered squibs created cheap but flashy gore, while the dialogue leaned into camp. What started as a grim dystopia became a satire of America's obsession with media violence and authoritarian control. That rewrite saved the project, transforming it from a downbeat cautionary tale into the outrageous blood-soaked comedy that made it legendary. Fact 3. A battle between gore and comedy. Director Paul Bartel wanted Death Race 2000 to be a black comedy, full of irony and guilty pleasure laughs. Roger Corman wanted more blood, more bodies, and bigger splatter. Their creative tug-of-war shaped the movie's unique tone. Bartel spent a year writing for just $5,000. Only to watch his satirical moments replaced by crushed heads and squibs. Yet his dark humor survived in the absurd scoring system, fan worship, and government propaganda satire. The final movie exists as a hybrid, part satire, part exploitation gorefest. Neither vision won entirely, but that imbalance gave the film its strange, unforgettable personality. Too funny to be pure horror, too violent to be camp, it was exploitation in its purest form, forged in conflict between a director's wit and a producer's appetite for carnage. Fact 4. From Peter Fonda to David Carradine. Corman initially wanted Peter Fonda, hot off Easy Rider, to play Frankenstein. But when Fonda read the script, he dismissed it as too ridiculous and walked away. That rejection nearly sank the casting, until David Carradine, famous for TV's Kung Fu, stepped in. Carradine accepted on one condition: 10% of the film's gross. It was a bold move on a tiny budget exploitation flick, but it paid off. When the movie pulled $14 million in US and Canadian box office, Carradine's share became one of his most profitable deals. What Fonda considered laughable turned into a cult-defining role for Carradine, cementing him as the face of Frankenstein. His gamble outshined Hollywood salaries, proving even B-movies could pay like blockbusters if the cards fell right. Fact 5. Carradine. Nearly replaced by Lee Majors. Despite his lucrative deal, Carradine clashed heavily with director Paul Bartel. Their disagreements over tone and character nearly led to Carradine's firing. Bartel even considered replacing him with Lee Majors, then a rising TV star on The $6 Million Man. The thought of pulling the lead mid-production shows how strained the set had become. In the end, Bartel and Carradine patched things up, and their creative tension influenced the movie's ending, where Frankenstein turns against the system. The near replacement became part of the chaotic mythology of the film. Had Carradine been fired, Death Race 2000 might have been a very different movie, and its cult reputation may never have existed. Instead, Carradine's Frankenstein became its enduring symbol. Fact 6. Stallone rewrote his own dialogue. Sylvester Stallone, still years away from Rocky, was cast as Machine Gun Joe Viterbo for his raw energy, but he wasn't satisfied with his lines. Stallone rewrote much of his dialogue, injecting manic insults, crude humor, and swaggering bravado. His ad-libs gave Machine Gun Joe an unhinged personality that stood out even in a film full of killers. Lines that might have been forgettable on paper became snarling, quotable tirades. Stallone's improvisation showed early hints of the writer who would later script Rocky. His aggressive energy helped balance Carradine's calm, making their rivalry explosive. For a small exploitation flick, his improvisation left a huge mark. Fact 7. Calamity. Jane couldn't drive. Mary Woronov's Calamity Jane was one of the deadliest racers, but behind the scenes she couldn't drive at all. Her weaponized car was too unsafe for untrained drivers, and stunt doubles refused some setups. The solution was low-budget trickery, towing her car behind a flatbed truck for close-ups, making it appear as if she were driving. Wide shots used doubles sparingly, but much of her driving was an illusion. It added to the film's scrappy charm, a vicious racer who couldn't operate a vehicle. That improvisation was typical of the production, where practical fixes created cinematic magic. It also highlighted how risky the cars were, even for professionals. Fact 8. Carradine's profit deal paid off. Carradine's deal for 10% of gross box office made him the financial winner of Death Race 2000. With box office returns reaching $14 million, his cut dwarfed his standard acting fees. In exploitation cinema, where actors were usually underpaid, Carradine flipped the system. His foresight not only secured wealth, but also elevated his status. While Corman and Bartel clashed over creative control, Carradine quietly ensured he would leave richer than almost anyone else on set. It was one of the rare cases where the star of a low-budget exploitation film walked away with blockbuster-level profits. Fact 9. Pedestrian kills. Filmed guerrilla style. With extras too expensive, production filmed several pedestrian kills during real racing events and along public roads. Locals watching genuine sports competitions were unknowingly turned into background for dystopian murder scenes. Shots of crowds cheering weren't staged, they were taken directly from real events. Drivers swerved through practical setups on open streets, creating a dangerous authenticity. This guerrilla tactic saved money, but blurred the line between fiction and reality. Ordinary townsfolk became unwilling extras in a satire about state-sanctioned murder. It was reckless, but it worked, giving the film a raw, unpredictable edge that could never be replicated by controlled studio setups. Fact 10. Actors performed their own driving stunts. The film's 5 wild race cars were designed by custom car legend Dean Jeffries, but they weren't street legal and were considered too dangerous by stunt drivers. Refusals left Carradine and Stallone to do much of their own driving stunts. They piloted their vehicles through chaotic sequences, risking serious injury if the machines failed. Their involvement added realism to the on-screen rivalry, but it was also hazardous. Unlike polished studio stunts, this was exploitation cinema's brand of danger, stars risking their lives to sell the illusion. It was reckless filmmaking, but it gave the movie grit. Fact 11. Carmageddon was inspired by the film. Death Race 2000's absurd point system for killing pedestrians didn't just shock audiences, it shaped video game history. Decades later, the Carmageddon franchise borrowed directly from the film, awarding players points for mowing down civilians. The games became notorious, banned in some countries, and attacked by critics. Yet their DNA traces back to Corman's satire. What began as a grindhouse joke became a controversial gaming franchise, proving the staying power of the movie's twisted ideas. It was exploitation cinema influencing a new medium, decades after its release. Fact 12. Dean Jeffries built the killer cars. Dean Jeffries, known for Hollywood custom vehicles like the Monkey Mobile, designed the 5 outlandish cars of Death Race 2000. Each vehicle embodied its driver's persona: Frankenstein's reptilian beast, Machine Gun Joe's Tommy Gun Cadillac, and Calamity Jane's bull-horned machine. They weren't practical or safe, but they became icons of the film. The car's wild, sculptural shapes gave the low-budget production a sense of style that outshined its limited resources. Jeffries' craftsmanship elevated the movie beyond typical grindhouse fare, cementing the cars as stars in their own right. Fact 13. Real crowds filmed cheap. Instead of hiring extras, Corman filmed big crowd shots during real sporting events. When you see packed stands cheering, those are genuine audiences watching unrelated competitions. The production planted cameras, shot quickly, and later spliced the footage into violent sequences. It was a trademark Corman strategy: recycle reality for fiction. The tactic gave the film scale on a budget, making the spectacle look larger than it was. Viewers believed they were seeing dystopian blood sport crowds, but in reality, they were just watching average sports fans, unknowingly immortalized in exploitation cinema. Fact 14. Bartol's sister was sacrificed on screen. Director Paul Bartel cast his sister Wendy in one of the movie's most grotesque moments, a fan who sacrifices herself beneath Frankenstein's car. The scene is shocking not only for its brutality, but also for its personal touch. Bartel turned family into fodder for his satire, making his own sister part of the absurd body count. It was exploitation filmmaking at its most intimate, low budgets forcing directors to use whoever they could find, even family. The result was a memorable death scene that blurred the line between art and life, leaving Wendy Bartel forever tied to the cult classic. Fact 15. Rivalry. Fueled by real tension. On-screen, Frankenstein and Machine Gun Joe's rivalry drove the story. Off-screen, Carradine and Stallone were genuinely at odds. Both men were strong-willed, with Carradine leveraging his star power and Stallone eager to stand out. Their competitive energy seeped into their performances, adding authenticity to their hostility. Every glare, insult, and on-road duel carried traces of their real conflict. For a low-budget film, that natural tension became cinematic gold. What might have been a simple exploitation rivalry turned into one of the most electric dynamics in grindhouse cinema, fueled by ego, ambition, and real dislike. Fact 16. A cult hit that multiplied its budget. 40x. With a budget under $1 million, Death Race 2000 earned around $14 million in the US and Canada, multiplying its investment over 40 times. For Corman, it was one of his most profitable projects, proving again that low-budget exploitation could rival mainstream box office. Its success wasn't just financial, it gave the film cult status, ensuring decades of re-releases, retrospectives, and influence across media. What began as a quick cash grab became one of exploitation cinema's defining hits. Fact 17. Frankenstein. Lived on in comics. In 1995, Death Race 2020 appeared as an 8-issue comic series. It revived Frankenstein in a bizarre future with new racers and satirical exaggerations. Though the series was short-lived and uneven, it showed how the franchise's concept was adaptable beyond film. Fans got to see new incarnations of dystopian road warriors, extending the mythos of the original. While it lacked the impact of the movie, the comic demonstrated how the film's DNA could evolve in strange directions, keeping the legacy alive even in print. Fact 18. From grindhouse to franchise. What started as a $300,000 satire grew into a full franchise. The 2008 remake modernized the concept with more serious tones. Direct-to-video prequels expanded its mythology, while Corman himself returned in 2017 to produce Death Race 2050, a deliberate throwback to the campy chaos of the original. Few exploitation films evolve into franchises spanning decades, but Death Race 2000 did. It transformed from a one-off quickie into a cultural property that continues to attract new generations of fans. Fact 19. Its satire feels more relevant than ever. In 1975, critics dismissed the movie as silly. Decades later, its satire reads like prophecy, a society obsessed with violent entertainment, authoritarian control disguised as spectacle, and media glorifying brutality, all themes that resonate today. What once seemed cartoonish now feels disturbingly familiar. The film's exaggerated point system for pedestrian kills mirrors modern debates on desensitization. Corman's rush job exploitation ended up eerily future-proof. That staying power is why fans still revisit it, finding uncomfortable truths under the cartoon gore. Fact 20. Bartel regretted the too real direction. Director Paul Bartel later admitted regrets about the tone. He revealed that Corman urged him to make the film harder and more realistic, emphasizing gore over satire. Bartel felt he compromised too much, leaving the movie caught between parody and brutality. He wished he had leaned further into comedy. Yet fans argue the uneasy mix is what made it unique. The awkward balance gave it a jagged personality that pure satire or pure gore couldn't achieve. Bartel may have regretted the compromise, but audiences celebrated it, cementing Death Race 2000 as a one-of-a-kind cult legend. Death Race 2000 wasn't safe. It wasn't clean. It was a chaotic collision of satire, gore, and reckless filmmaking. Actors doing their own stunts. Crowds filmed without consent. A lead star almost fired. A director torn between laughs and blood. It should have been a wreck. Instead, it became one of the most profitable, influential exploitation films ever made. If you love the secrets behind twisted cinema, buckle up, because this race never really ended.